When we look at an ornate marble monument, we assume the person buried there owns that small plot of land forever. But because usable land is finite, cemeteries function as highly regulated spaces built on temporary leaseholds. There is a massive gap between public expectation and the legal framework governing burial sites. The assumption is we're buying freehold public property to decorate however we see fit. The reality is a temporary lease on private property, subject to strict municipal ordinances. Misunderstanding these rules can lead to a family grave being legally declared abandoned, leaving descendants to navigate a dense bureaucratic maze to save it. The myth of permanent rest carries heavy financial and legal weight. Understanding your contract is the only way to protect your family's history. When you pay for a plot, you are usually buying an exclusive right of burial. Legally, this functions as a lease, typically lasting between 25 and 75 years. Once that lease expires, the rights don't automatically roll over. Your descendants have to actively pay renewal fees to keep the plot active. If they fail to renew, the space can be reclaimed. New legislative proposals, like the UK Law Commission's recent plan, would allow cemeteries to reuse graves once they pass the 100-year mark if they remain unclaimed. Even while your lease is active, you do not have the freedom to decorate the plot at your own discretion. Municipalities enforce strict local ordinances to mitigate premises liability and maintain aesthetic control over the grounds. These rules dictate everything from the exact size and composition of the monuments to strict limits on the number of flower pots or raised landscape beds you can add. Over time, harsh weather and natural decay inevitably compromise those pristine aesthetic standards, placing the physical maintenance burden on the next generation. The purchase of a plot secures a temporary rental of space, while assigning a maintenance obligation to future generations. The legal complications peak when a family attempts to bury a relative in an existing ancestral plot, only to realize the original deed owner is already deceased. If that original owner died intestate, meaning without a valid will, it triggers complex municipal probate laws regarding who actually controls the grave. Reclaiming that deed requires filing a statutory declaration with local authorities and paying transfer fees. But the highest hurdle is securing written, legal consent from every single living next of kin to transfer the ownership to a single representative. Across a multi-generational family tree, you must track down siblings, cousins, and distant relatives for signatures. But a single dispute creates a legal stalemate. Without consensus, no new burials or inscriptions are allowed. What was intended to be a unifying generational gathering place easily becomes a legally frozen asset, trapped in family bureaucracy. Many assume that choosing cremation bypasses all this property and legal friction by removing the need for a physical plot. However, storing cremated remains at home carries practical risks. Ashes are frequently divided among heirs or accidentally lost during residential moves. Major religious institutions also weigh in. The Vatican strictly mandates that ashes cannot be kept at home or separated. They must remain intact and be placed in a consecrated burial ground. These institutional rules align closely with genealogical needs, preserving a permanent physical marker that future generations can visit. Still, modern cultural resistance is growing. Many people choose to scatter remains to avoid the ongoing costs and logistics of a church burial. Popular celebrity-led views often advocate for indiscriminate scattering, directly conflicting with traditional institutional requirements. Scattering ashes definitely circumvents cemetery bureaucracy, but it also deprives descendants of the physical focal point required for genealogical veneration. For those who do have a physical family plot, there is often a desire to personally restore abandoned, overgrown ancestral graves out of respect. Doing this carries hidden legal liabilities. You risk trespassing on private property or violating strict Human Remains Protection Acts if you disturb the soil. Even well-meaning additions, like erecting a small fence, can trigger code violations with the local municipality or lead to trespassing issues on private land. Digital genealogy offers a liability-free alternative to physical preservation. Platforms like Billion Graves use crowdsourced GPS data and photography to log gravestones into searchable global databases. When we plot these two approaches on this chart, the trade-off is clear. Physical cleaning requires significant effort and legal risk. Digital mapping preserves data across global servers with minimal effort and near-zero liability. Moving records into searchable databases avoids the legal liabilities of physical restoration while making the data accessible to anyone with a smartphone. You cannot buy permanence. You can only lease it, manage it, or digitize it. Physical ownership makes sense for families with strong geographic roots and the financial ability to fund perpetual care trusts. Dispersed families, or those without clear wills, should rely on digital legacy tracking to preserve their history without taking on legal risk. To secure a gravesite today, review this checklist. First, update plot ownership to a living heir. Second, secure maintenance by funding trust accounts. Finally, log the location digitally to protect against the decay of the physical stone. The ultimate act of respecting the dead is proactively handling the legal paperwork today, ensuring their memory doesn't become a bureaucratic nightmare for the living.